I mean, it sounds like a plot pulled straight from a Hollywood thriller, right? Pure sensationalist fiction. But for some people, this nightmare wasn't a movie. It was terrifyingly real. Section 1, the murder poets. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, in this explainer, we are exploring a deeply chilling, honestly almost incomprehensible phenomenon. We're looking at criminals hiding in plain sight. Literally, the monsters who held the microphone, stood under those bright studio lights, and stared right back into our living rooms. So, what exactly is a murder poet? Well, it's a term for journalists who quite literally reported on their own crimes. They hid right behind the microphone meant to bring the truth to the public. They used their respected, trusted positions to cover their tracks, manipulate the narrative, and stay one step ahead of the law. It's just the ultimate, unimaginable betrayal of public trust. Section 2, the celebrity serial killer. Let's shift gears into a truly twisted story about a man who managed to fool an entire justice system and subsequently an entire nation with some seriously chilling sophistication. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer audacity of this timeline. This is the unbelievable story of Jack Unterweger. Back in the 1970s, Jack was convicted of murder in Austria, but while sitting behind bars, he started writing. We're talking plays, poems. He even wrote children's stories that were actually broadcast on the radio. He became a full-blown literary celebrity straight from his prison cell. The public genuinely believed he was a changed man, a reformed intellectual. So 15 years later, he's released, and shortly after, he doesn't just quietly fade away and enjoy his freedom. No, he steps right back into the spotlight and, against all reason, gets hired as a journalist. Jack built this incredibly audacious facade. Picture this, he's walking around the city wearing these really sharp white silk suits, driving a Mustang. He was charming, fashionable, a total darling of the elite. But then, tragically, women started disappearing again. And the absolute wildest part, Jack was the actual guy hired to report on these disappearances. He literally hosted radio segments where he would dissect the killer's psychology in vivid, chilling detail. And the absolute peak of his hubris, he interviewed the head of the crime unit to quote-unquote help with the investigation. He was actively chatting with the very police hunting him, just pretending to be their trusted ally. No way, right? People actually started calling him the murder poet because he was so eloquent, just so incredibly good at speaking about the crimes. But the truth was far, far darker. The murder poet was following his own trail of bodies. From Austria all the way across the globe to Los Angeles, California, he was covering his own tracks, reporting on his own depravity. But eventually, that arrogant facade crumbled. DNA and hair samples finally linked him back to the very crime scenes he was so eagerly reporting on. Section 3, killing for TV ratings. So Jack Unterweger used his platform to feed his own twisted ego. But what happens when the motive shifts to immense, systemic corruption in pure, unchecked greed? For that, we're traveling down to Brazil. This brings us to Wallace Souza, the hero of a wildly popular television show called Canal Livre. Souza had the absolute perfect resume for public trust, a former cop turned beloved TV host. He painted himself as this relentless crusader, a famous crime fighter publicly railing against drug traffickers on national television. He was viewed as a hero to the people, right? A real beacon of justice in a corrupt world. But there was one incredibly suspicious detail about his broadcast. Time and time again, his camera crews almost always managed to beat the police to the crime scene. People started noticing how unbelievably fast his crew was. But in one particularly disturbing broadcast, his reporter stood over a smoldering body at a fresh, chaotic crime scene, looked straight into the lens, and calmly told the camera, "It smells like barbecue." It became painfully clear that he knew specific, gruesome details about the execution that a journalist simply shouldn't have known upon just arriving. And then the horrifying truth broke. A former associate confessed the dark reality. Wallace Souza wasn't just reporting the news, he was ordering the hits. Souza was allegedly a full-on cartel kingpin. He was having people executed not just to eliminate his criminal competition, but to ensure his camera crews were first on the scene, soaking up all that violence just to boost his broadcast ratings. It's just staggering. Section 4, the too perfect reporter. So from a flashy, corrupt TV host, we now move to our final and perhaps most intimate horror story. A story that unfolded quietly and terrifyingly in a small town in Macedonia. This is Vlado Tanishevsky. Vlado was known to everyone as a quiet, mild-mannered local journalist. Totally unassuming, almost invisible, really. But when a sadistic serial killer started targeting elderly women in his small community, Vlado was suddenly always the first one on the scene. And his coverage was uncanny. He wrote incredibly detailed articles about the crimes. It was like he knew exactly what the killer was doing every single time. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact moment he slipped up. The police had only released to the public that the victims died by general strangulation. That was the established public knowledge. But in Tedeschi's article, he specifically wrote about the exact type of telephone cord used to strangle the victims. This was highly classified crime scene information that the police had absolutely never made public. The smoking gun was printed right there in black and white. The police immediately realized Vlado knew way too much. They brought him in, they tested him, and his DNA was a perfect match to the evidence found on the victims. The quiet, mild-mannered man documenting the horror for the town was actually the monster creating it. And the psychology behind his crimes is incredibly dark. It turns out Vlado was targeting women who actually knew his own mother. In a truly twisted, haunting revelation, police discovered that he even wrapped one of the victims in his own mother's clothing. Section 5, Hiding in Plain Sight. These stories bring us to a deeply unsettling reality. We naturally rely on journalists to shine a light in the dark, to protect us by exposing the truth. But sometimes the people we trust the most, the ones holding the cameras and the microphones, are the ones hiding the absolute darkest secrets, hiding right in plain sight. From Jack Underweger's arrogant interviews with police, to Wallace Sousa's deadly ratings grabs, to Vlada Tedeschi's intimate betrayals, it leaves us with a chilling question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Which of these cases do you think is the most unreal? Think about that the next time you turn on the evening news. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.